All right. Hello, everybody. I hope you all are doing well. For those of you that don't know, this is the NBA Tournament Strategy Show, where usually we take a look back at last night's slate, then we go game by game, talk about guys that look a little bit interesting, potential leverage plays, things of that sort. And then on the pre-lock show at 5:30 p.m. for VIP members only, link in the description. Feel free to use promo code BOB for a 10% discount. We talk about the leverage plays, which for me means a guy that I'm going to make sure I'm double the field on. We talk about core plays. We talk about guys we're going under the field on, and really just how I'm using the domination station that night. So uh, definitely, usually a good time. Appreciate you all for joining. Dave, good to see you. I'm doing well, man. You know, the time changing thing always messes with my head a little bit, but outside of that, I'm doing fine. Christopher said, "Let's go." Agreed. Hopefully, it's a good slate. It's a pretty interesting one, to be honest. It's interesting. I don't know if I like it or not yet. We'll see. Appreciate you, Dave. Definitely do hit the like button, share, subscribe. We're growing out here. Good to see it. Appreciate y'all support. Thomas Dye, good to see you, man. All right, let's look at this slate. Solid 7-game slate, solid balance. Like we haven't had a monstrous slate in a while, which is honestly something I appreciate. Also, I don't play DFS or I don't play NBA DFS on Sunday, so there's nothing to look back on for me. So let's jump into the games. And we're starting off with probably one of the more interesting ones. We have the Pacers against the Pistons. For those of you that don't know, the one and only uh Tyrese Halliburton is out. Halliburton being out is a pretty big deal. It gives us some value options on this slate, which is always something that I appreciate. What might be more important on this slate, though, at this point is Buddy Hield. He's currently listed as questionable. If he's out, we can trust some of these value plays a lot more. They're already in good spots, but if Buddy Hield is out, they become potentially really great spots. Miles Turner is out. Benedict Mathurin is out. They are missing guys, which always makes me feel a little bit better about playing some of these names that we don't typically enjoy playing. And then TJ McConnell's been out for a little while now, so no major surprises there. So what we should expect, Nimbard has been the guy for this team with Halliburton out. He's really been leading things from an offensive standpoint. So I think we can feel pretty solid about him. I know we saw Jackson and Smith have some really strong performances over the weekend. Again, I'm not really betting on that to happen again, but I do feel slightly better about it if Hield is out, just because that should make sure they continue to be very involved in the offense. If Hield ends up playing, Smith and Jackson are plays I'm fine with, but not guys I feel like I have to be over the field on. The Pistons in general is not a team I'm afraid to attack against. So it really does just make all these guys more viable as well. Chris Duarte at 4,200 should be the super chalk on this slate if we don't get any more injury news. Plays solid minutes, decent usage rate, decent points per minute guy at 4,200. He feels like one of the better value options on this slate, if not the best value option. And I feel solid with Chris Duarte. I plan on eating him as a chalk play. But once again, I feel much better about him if Buddy Hield actually ends up being out. So yeah, we're playing the Pacers today, guys. We are playing the Pacers. Honestly, there's no world where I don't really see myself not playing them. Another team with a lot of solid value on it is the Pistons. So here we go again. We have Jaden Ivey out. Marvin Bagley's out. Alec Burks is out. We're talking about guys who are pretty high usage guys here. Isaiah Stewart is out. Bojan Bogdanovic is out. Diallo's still out. Cade Cunningham is out. The guy that everyone and their mom's going to be playing for good reason is Killian Hayes. Killian Hayes has been fantastic lately. He's still a little bit too cheap for the upside he brings to the table, especially with Ivy out. I can't think of a great reason to not play Hayes right now outside of him being ungodly, very highly owned, but he's highly owned for good reason at 5,700. If we don't get more value on this slate, I'm fine with it. And I'll be eating a lot of the Pistons and Pacers chalk to make sure I get exposure to the guys that I want. Also, the Pistons are just missing a shit ton of guys. And because of that there's there's still other plays on this team that I want exposure to. So we've seen guys like Wiseman and Duran see a little bit more run. They're still not quite seeing the minutes that I would feel better about like having a ton of exposure to them at, which is why they're lower owned than some of the other chalky options on the table. But they're potential sneaky high upside leverage plays. We've been playing bigs against the Pacers for the vast majority of this season. And so I am tempted. Like I know I want exposure to Wiseman and Duran, but I they're on my radar as like a potential leverage play for sure. I don't know if I have the guts to do it yet, but they're on the radar. And then outside of that, um, we've seen Corey Joseph be a bit more productive here lately. We've seen Magruder get a little bit more run too, even RJ Hampton. These are all viable plays for me because the Pistons are missing so many guys. But again, like no one's really standing out for me as like someone I feel like I have to be over the field on outside of Hayes. So all these guys are viable. I plan on having exposure to them. There's some potential sneaky spots here with Duran and Wiseman, but overall, I just know I want exposure to it. So as long as the domination station is doing that for me, I can breathe a little bit easier. DD said, "What's good, Rabbit?" I don't know. Hopefully you're doing all right, man. Hope you're doing good. Next up, we have the Utah Jazz against the Miami Heat. You guys know I don't like really playing anyone against the Miami Heat, but the Jazz have just enough guys out where they're semi-interesting. Sexton's out. That's already been confirmed, but Clarkson's listed as questionable. Clarkson matters a lot. He's a pretty high usage guy when he plays. And when he's out, we see guys like THT see a boost. We talked about last time, Achai Agbaji sees a nice little boost. Markkanen sees an increase in usage. These are all Markkanen probably more so than some of the others, just due to their price tag. But Markkanen is definitely someone that I am more interested in if Clarkson's out. And if his ownership stays around 1% ownership, I can almost guarantee he'll be a leverage play for me at some sort. But his ownership will probably increase to at least being around 5 to 10%. So I'll at least be around field weight if Clarkson ends up getting out. THT becomes a viable guard, but hard to like force exposure to him at this point at 7K. More viable play if Clarkson's out, but hard to be super excited about him at this price tag, unfortunately. Agbaji would be a potential pivot off of some of the chalkier plays in the earlier games. So he's someone that I want to keep an eye on, but it's going to be hard to make a case for him over the easier, softer matchup, which is the first game for both sides. But pivot options. I always like having pivot options. For the Miami Heat, they come into a spot where they're facing a relatively not the toughest matchup against the Jazz these days, but the unfortunate thing is that they're getting healthier and healthier and healthier. So we saw Kyle Lowry come back the other night, played a crap ton of minutes because Martin was out. Martin's questionable alongside Lowry, so who knows who's actually going to end up playing here. But if one or both end up playing, it really just decreases my interest in this team as a whole. Hero 6,900's price tag's coming down a little bit, makes him a little bit more viable. Wonder what the sim model thinks about him. He's okay. Has some upside, but nothing too crazy. I'm less interested in him with Lowry and crew potentially returning. If Lowry misses this game, I think Hero becomes like a viable tournament option. But again, like not much is standing out for me when it comes to him. If he was a little bit lower owned, I would consider it a little bit more. But as of right now, I don't really foresee me being above field weight to Hero. Butler's always viable as long as he's underneath 9K. I'm okay being around field weight, but not someone I plan on being above field weight on as of right now. Then we get the Grizzlies. The Grizzlies are finally all close to being priced appropriately, so they're not really standing out too much with John Morant not playing on this team right now. Jake LaRavia is also out. Vince Williams is also out. Brandon Clark's out. Steven Adams has been out for a while now, so nothing's really too crazy here these days. Let's see what the sim model thinks about JJJ, who is Jaren Jackson Jr. at 8,500. He's always a guy that I'm more than happy to take a shot on. We know Dallas isn't great against bigs. The problem is that they still play at a relatively slow pace. So not usually the type of team I like to force exposure against. They're also playing. They're also They also have the lowest game total on the slate. So again, just not a game environment I love forcing exposure to. But Jaren Jackson in single digit ownership, I'm always willing to get on board with that. I don't know if he'll be a leverage play for me, but it's still a play that has some interest, that I have some interest in, that I want to target. Desmond Bain is popping as probably the guy who's the most popular here. He has been leading the team in usage with a 23.8% usage rate. We also have Jaren Jackson Jr. with 23.7% usage rate. So they're both kind of neck and neck. But the reason why that matters is because, Bain's cheaper by $100. So I think both can be viable, but I always lean slightly towards the guy who's a little bit lower owned. Tyus Jones, not the extreme value that we've had earlier with him. He's now just kind of priced appropriately. There's other guards in the Pacers-Pistons game where we have more value, potentially some guards that might stand out for the Jazz. For me, over Jones, but not a guy that I'm trying to force fade. It's just not my favorite spot for him. Let's see. Yeah, Grizzlies. I like JJ. I like Jaren Jackson Jr., but not really that many guys standing out for me. Bear Turnal said DeJounte Murray under points first half. I'm not a prize picks or underdogs guy, unfortunately, man. So I don't even know like what people have for him. I do recommend checking out Sniper. Sniper does our prize picks show on our channel. I don't know if he has one up, but he does one sometimes two throughout the day. So definitely recommend checking that out. For the Mavericks, we have Luka Doncic out. Doncic being out makes these guys slightly more viable than they would be without him. But everyone's kind of priced pretty appropriately, which really just makes them not fun plays. Kyrie Irving at 10,500 just feels right with Luka out, so we're not getting him at a discount. Tim Hardaway has been hot here recently, but again, like the matchup's pretty meh. Nothing really stands out too much. His ownership's interesting and makes him more viable. I do want to take some shots on this team without Luka. It's just I like attacking spots when there's a guy who's out. The team is still relatively low owned. They're all priced appropriately. Usually there's at least one guy who goes overlooked. And so Tim Hardaway Jr. is on my radar as being that guy. Kyrie Irving on my radar as being that guy. And if those two don't pan out, I have some interest in Reggie Bullock as well. He's also another pivot option off of some of the earlier chalky value we saw at the start in that first game. So some potential options here that I like. I don't want to forget about the Mavericks tonight. Not a guy that's really sold me yet, but I do want some exposure to it. Next up, we have Anthony Edwards. Edwards disappointed some people on Friday, I believe, but I'm more than willing to go back to the well when it comes to him. His ownership makes it so it's going to be a little bit hard for me to make him a leverage play, but he's another guy that I feel good about tonight. I like his upside. Sim model likes him as well, but let's double check that and make sure I'm not making stuff up. Grizzlies, no, Timberwolves. All right. What matters probably the absolute most, though, when it comes to the Timberwolves tonight is Rudy Gobert. He's listed as questionable. If he plays, he's in a solid spot. I think he has some decent upside against this Hawks team, not a team I'm afraid of. But if he's out, we can all go back to our guy Naz Reid with plenty of confidence here. So I'm interested in seeing what happens. Hopefully we get the news with plenty of time to spare and we don't have to worry about too much. But I would love Naz Reid here. Everyone else will too, and he'll be the super chalk on the slate. But would give me a little bit more security at the center and power forward position. So I would be fine with Rudy Gobert being out. Kyle Anderson and Anthony Edwards are both projecting solidly well, but let's look at Anthony Edwards. Like I said, I think the sim model likes him. Yeah, sim model likes him. And I always just look at the 8x column here. You see the 1.7%. You compare that to the people around him. No one's really very close, besides the guy in the next game. So Anthony Edwards, I'll at least be around field weight exposure to him. If we're lacking other leverage options, then he will be a leverage play. Kyle Anderson, I say it all the time, I'm biased against him, but he's been in solid form. So for me, my only rule is that he's not going to be a core play for me, but I'm fine being double the field on him. And as long as he continues to project this strongly, totally fine being in that same situation once again. Mike Conley, there's better plays, but he's fine as like a lineup filler. We talked about Rudy Gobert, viable play if he plays. He should be super low owned if we get that news late too. I mean, hopefully he ends up being out and we get that news well in advance, but there's a world. There's a world where things get weird. And then Torrin Prince is viable, but I am more open to playing him if Rudy Gobert is out. Yeah, I think that's it. Also, the highest total tied for the highest game total on the slate. So a game that you're going to want exposure to that team. Similar story to the Hawks. You guys know I rarely ever play Trey Young when everyone's pretty much healthy for this team. Bogdan Bogdanovic is questionable, so that matters a little bit. Clint Capella has a super easy matchup if Gobert ends up being out, so that's something to remember as well. DeJounte Murray at 5% ownership. Like I said, I don't like playing these starters when they're healthy, but the sim model likes him today, and everyone's playing Trey Young, and I will, as long as that ownership stays around 5% on Murray, can almost guarantee he'll be a leverage play for me today. Mostly the low ownership when we're talking about one of the higher game totals on the slate has similar, like just even his projections, like relatively close to Trey Young. He's about $1,000 cheaper and he's lower owned. Like I'm always going to go for that. Of course, Trey Young has a ton of upside. If he takes this game over, I'll regret not having enough of him. But hopefully the domination station gives me a little bit where I'm not feeling extreme FOMO. So for me, it's DeJounte Murray, Clint Capella if Gobert ends up getting ruled out, and I'll probably just move on from there. Hard for me to take shots on Bay and Collins these days. Hunter, I'm okay with if the domination station just gives me some exposure to him naturally, but not a guy I'm trying to force exposure to unless something just really starts to stand out later. All right. I think we're good to go. Next up, we have a game with a gigantic spread on Doc. We have the Celtics against the Rockets. You all know me. I don't really love the Celtics very much when they're healthy. Peyton Pritchard is out. Robert Williams is out. Daniel Gallinari is out. But overall, no one's really standing out for me too much here. You can always make a case to play Al Horford when Robert Williams is out, especially against a really bad Rockets team. But the Rockets are bad everywhere, so you can make that case for pretty much all of these guys. Jason Tatum's popular at 23%. I would like him more if he was not as popular. Curious to see what the sim model thinks about Jaylen Brown. It's okay with them. It likes Anthony Edwards a lot more. So Jaylen Brown is a viable, like it's weird to say this. Let me make sure. Yeah, I feel this way. So like I think Tatum has like plenty of upside. He's not someone I'm trying to fade. He's just someone I'm not trying to force exposure to when he's already pretty popular. Jaylen Brown's a little bit more interesting for me. Also in a fantastic soft matchup, but he's less popular. I'm honestly, I'm either just not going to have a lot of exposure to the Celtics tonight and just hoping the game blows out, or I'm going to go over on Brown. And I haven't decided yet which way I'm going to go, but we'll know by the pre-lock show. It's an interesting spot. Soft matchup, low ownership, price tag's not crazy. It's just that for the most part, outside of Williams, they're healthy. So it's hard to really want to take a shot on these guys. But Horford or Brown is kind of where I'm thinking and or leaning. The Rockets are pretty much healthy. Shungen is probable, but he'll probably play. So not overly concerned about that. The Celtics haven't been as stout of a defense here lately, so that's something to consider as well. But the Rockets just aren't a team that I have a lot of exposure to when Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green are healthy. So I'm not going to have a lot of exposure to them. I don't love that game. It's weird. Like, I'm not big on blowouts or trying to predict blowouts, but not my favorite spot for those guys. JJ Wasabi, good to see you, man. And you're not wrong. It's 11 o'clock somewhere for sure. Wasabi, good to see you, Carlos. Good to see you. All right. Now, this Suns game, I do have a bit more interest in. Kevin Durant's out. Who knows how long he'll be out? Shamit's out still. Devin Booker, 12% ownership on my radar as a leverage play. DeAndre Ayton, 15% ownership on my radar as a leverage play. My reasoning for that is because the Warriors are god awful. They're just not a great defense right now. So I'm totally fine attacking with Booker and Ayton with KD out still. Chris Paul every now and then can do something while he's out there, but more often than not these days, just not a guy that I plan on forcing exposure to, who I'm going to be double the field on. Josh Okogie is interesting. I think the sim model likes him. Let me see if I'm right about that. Yeah, sim model likes Okogie a lot. And he's pretty low owned too. So as long as he stays around this 6% ownership, I'm fine putting like a 15% min on him, maybe 10 if he gets closer to 5%. KD, I mean, Okogie had some solid games even when Kevin Durant was playing still. So I feel I'm not going to say I have a ton of confidence in Okogie because as you can see here, he can be a relatively low points per minute guy at times, especially when he's surrounded by guys who are high points per minute players. But playing solid minutes, facing a bad team, it feels like a spot you can be fairly efficient in. Leverage play. Torrey Craig's projecting well. If he shows up in my lines, he's another viable value option. I don't love it, but I'm okay with it. So just pivot off of the first game a little bit. I like having exposure to some of those plays, but not a guy that I need a ton of exposure to. Curry. The Warriors have news that matters once again too. We have Kuminga listed as questionable. Andrew Wiggins has been out for a while. That's really the big news here. We saw Looney and JaMychal Green both see an increase in minutes with Kuminga out. The issue here is that we don't know if they'll need to play both as much, but I like Looney here. If we get the news Kuminga's out, if Kuminga plays, I don't really have much interest in these guys at all. Curry, he's been a leverage play for us for like the last week or so. That's been going pretty well. I don't think I'm going to take a shot on him here. I'm not a big fan of picking on the Suns very often, and Curry's going to need to be very, very efficient to pay off that price tag. And since he does get most of his scoring from shooting, I like to pick my battles when it comes to him. So if I miss, I'm just going to have to live with it. Let's double check. Sim model, what do you think about Curry? 10,400. It likes him a little bit, actually. So we'll see on the pre-lock show. If we don't have other plays that stand out more for us, I'm going to make a decision. Like, I already know, like, Devin Booker's a guy we're going to be high on. Edwards we're going to be high on. We talked about a few of the other guys. But I do think I'm going to need to make a decision between Curry and Tatum here. Potentially Irving too, but less likely. Less likely. Okay. So we can move on. Last game on the slate, guys. With a little bit of time to spare. Giannis is questionable. I think we all know how big of a deal that is at this point. But man, these Bucks are expensive. Drew Holiday at 8,900, Chris Middleton at 8,200, Brooke Lopez. This worked out pretty well for us on Thursday or Friday. So if Giannis is out, I mean, we're definitely going to play Lopez again. If no one else does that, then that would be nice too. But I think people are probably going to catch on to that here soon. And then Bobby Portis would also be a viable play. But if Giannis plays, these guys are stupid expensive. So a little bit tougher to stomach if they all play. But if he's out, then they're definitely still viable options for me. Giannis himself, coming off of an injury, a hand injury at that, not really the biggest deal, to be honest. 6% ownership could be viable, but nothing's really standing out for him too much where I feel like this is a spot that I have to force exposure to him. But if I get a little bit, that's probably where I feel appropriate. Like right around 6-7% would be ideal. And then none of the other guys. And then for the Kings, a little bit cheaper than they've been in a while. Like I feel like Sabonis has been like a staple in like the 10K plus range for a good bit. And Fox stands out a little bit. But like we all know, like when it comes to this Bucks team, they're usually a solid defense, not a team that we like to pick on too much. The ownership on Sabonis and Fox feels appropriate. Like I don't feel like they're under-owned here. Barnes, I know he hurt some feelings, or was it Hoyter on Friday? I don't recall. I didn't really have a lot of exposure to them. But yeah, it's weird. I usually love forcing exposure to this last game, but I think a lot of those takes are going to be in the Suns-Warriors game and not as much this game. If Giannis plays, it's just a bit more of a bleh game environment. Fine having some exposure to these guys, but I don't have a strong enough take where I feel like I need to force exposure. So just to kind of like recap it all, one last go around. Love the Pistons Pacers game. Pretty meh about this game. Unless Clarkson's out, I like the Jazz. Gonna take some shots on the Memphis Grizzlies. Probably not gonna. Well, I'll take some shots on the Mavs too. Really like this Timberwolves Hawks game, but everyone else will as well. Don't really love the Rockets Celtics game. Really like the Suns Warriors game, and then I don't like this game as much either. The Bucks Kings, but we'll have everything settled and ready to go by the time we get to the pre-lock show. Look forward to seeing everyone then. 5 p.m. Eastern time, or no, 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. So hope you all have a great rest of your day. Have a good one. Peace out.